Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Carl Fazina from the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking with this distinguished panel about technology planning. I want to thank our host, the Jesse Ball DuPont Center for Nonprofits, as well as our sponsors, the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. So we're going to be talking about strategic planning and the role of technology in helping nonprofits achieve their strategic goals. To do this, we've gathered 4 experts with us. They represent knowledge in risk, infrastructure, law, and business process. So we'll start with the panel introductions. We're going to do alphabetical by first name. Augusto Russell. Augusto is a certified insurance counselor with over 30 years of experience in the insurance industry. In 2000, Augusto left his insurance career to work as the Director of Development for Hope Worldwide New England, which is a faith-based NGO in Andover, Massachusetts. In 2003, Augusto resumed his insurance career with May Boney Walsh as an independent insurance agent. Augusto focuses on cyber liability and risk management. And in 2016, Augusto was named the National Professional Insurance Agent of the Year. Welcome, Augusto.
Thanks for having me.
Greg Bugbee is the Senior Advisor at CCAT, which is the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, and the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund's technology partner. And they're also a 501c3 in East Hartford, Connecticut, and Jacksonville, Florida. Greg leads technology consulting efforts for CCAT as it seeks to shrink the digital divide in the nonprofit space, increase sustainability, and build capacity through technology. So thanks for joining, Greg.
Thank you, Carl. Great to be here.
Steve Bonafanti is a partner at the law firm of Davis, Clark, and Bonafanti. In addition to the general practice of law, Steve specializes in privacy and cybersecurity, IT contracts, and policies. He's a certified fraud examiner and a certified information privacy professional, and he speaks nationally on these issues. So thanks for joining us, Steve. And last but not least, Vikram Ahuja is the CTO partner with VLink, a global technology company, and Vikram has over 18 years of experience in technology management and strategy, IT advisory services, enterprise and integration architecture, and agile delivery. He has a bachelor in technology from IIT Kanpur and a master's in management from Harvard University. So thank you very much, Vikram.
Thanks, Alan.
As far as the discussion today, we're going to have this roundtable discussion over this webinar, and we're going to be talking about strategic planning. We're going to be talking about mission, risk, compliance, business processes, flexibility, scalability. Probably going to be talking about operations versus capital budgets, reliability, outsource versus core competencies of an organization, efficiency, availability, and security. So we're also going to be taking questions from the folks that are listening. We're going to be doing that via either the chat function or the Q&A. If something is directly applicable to what someone is saying and I can squeeze a question in, I'm going to attempt to interrupt and squeeze a question in, especially if it flows very well. Otherwise, we can wait, in some cases, to the end, maybe the last 15, 20 minutes, and we'll go through some questions at that point as well. So we'll start by getting on the right messaging. And I'm going to ask the first question for the panel. Why don't we just go in order that you are here. And so we'll start with Augusto. Broadly, what is technology strategy, or what is an essential component of technology strategy, and how does it fit within overall strategy?
You probably should have started with the other guys, but that's okay.
Let me start with Greg.
Well, technology strategy for me in the role that I serve with the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology and with assisting the nonprofits with the DuPont Fund really comes down to aligning technology with mission. And we spend a lot of time with nonprofits throughout the assessment process, looking at process, examining how they work, what the end goal is, because at the end of the day, our mission of our nonprofits is the most important thing. When we start looking at this and saying, how can we overlay technology to increase efficiency, drive down those administrative burdens that staff often have, those are the keys to returning an organization to mission. So many times we get sidetracked by technology, and technology can become a large burden on the organization. And returning it to its core is really what it's all about. So that's the main strategy. And how do we get there? I think the beginning part of this is really assessing where you're at as an organization, figuring out where you're at now, regardless of how large or small your technology footprint is within the organization. Just examining what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then figuring out, there's so many great tools out there, figuring out how to get there through the use of technology.
Great.
I'll just add upon what Greg just said. So any technology strategy is basically a part of overall strategy. It's the direction which an organization or a nonprofit chooses from going from point A to its goal. Now, nowadays, I will say it's more of a business strategy to manage technology rather than other way around, because your technology is intertwined into your business processes so much that it's difficult to have a technology practice separated from your business processes. So so we have to take the technology as well as business processes in synergy to basically define our strategy.
Well, carrying your mission, as Greg had said, is probably it's very important for you. And some of the things that can potentially get in the way would be things like technology and the things that we hear about that is associated with technology, the risks that come with it. In fact, in the Northeast, we just had a huge hack, if you will, that causes everyone to pause and think how our technology is being used and what kind of exposures we have. A couple of years ago, there was a study that said the nonprofit sector is the fourth industry, if you will, the fourth in terms of the number of attacks or claims. And that's only fourth from health, finance, and retail/professional. So if you don't think you're not at all impacted by any of this, especially if you're in the area of maintaining health records, you certainly want to make sure that it is part of your strategy of understanding the risks involved and then seeking the professionals who know how to mitigate those exposures. So I think as a C-level person in the nonprofit world, this really should be a focus given the issues. And one last thing is that it's the study also said 43% of these risks are from small businesses, and I believe many of our participants at this webinar come from a small business organization, as well as large, of course. So anyway, that's what I would like to make everyone aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was, what is a strategic? Just going back to what is a strategic IT information technology plan? What does that look like, and how do you tailor that to your organization? So I think it does have to be proportional to your organization. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of proposition. The counsel that I'll provide a lot of clients may very well debunk some of the propositions that are being sent to them. In other words, that what is being offered to them is far more than they would need for the services they seek to provide. So coming up with an idea and a plan that's tailored to what you want to do for your organization that allows for evolution of your systems. In some ways, it might be the first introduction of significant technology. And how do you do that? How do you find the right providers? How do you make sure that the contractual obligations of these providers to you protect your interests and you're actually getting the benefit of what you're bargaining for in that agreement? Those are the types of things constructively that we work on with nonprofits and for-profits and others, but particularly in the nonprofit world because they haven't evolved as much over the years. Healthcare, financial services, they've all had to evolve because of the technology has moved so quickly and regulation has moved so quickly, forcing them to invest millions of dollars in new systems. Nonprofits, it all depends. You may have been maybe getting along very well with a very analog pen and paper system, but now have reached the point where you're being required, either as a condition of grant funding or something else, to create systems and have better management information and more technology. So part of it, I think, is what you want to do, to grow and to enable growth and to better serve your clientele and your missions, and others will be extrinsic forces pushing you to do certain things that you might not have any desire to do, but know that you're going to need to do to stay competitive for scarce funding.
Just want to add to that a little bit. There's a kind of square or triangle that I tend to use when looking at nonprofit IT, and there's 3 or 4 corners depending upon how you look at this scenario. One of them is reliability. Do we have uptime of our systems? Are they capable of sustaining us in the future? Because reliability is so critical. People come to your nonprofit, they decide to work there because they believe in what you provide as a service. They believe in helping people. They believe in the larger mission of the organization. When systems don't work, that impacts morale of the organization, that impacts the effectiveness of your staff out there in the field. So reliability is off on one side of this triangle. Usability is on the other side. How well do systems integrate? Does data flow effectively from one side to the other? And can you have an information flow that starts where people first contact your organization, then that data goes into the middle part of the organization where it's manipulated, analyzed, and then the results are finally produced? Is that process an even process? Security is another part of this triangle that we're building here. Is information secure when it enters our organization? What is our risk footprint of the organization as well? That's on the security side. And then sustainability is kind of this overarching goal here. How sustainable are the solutions that we have? Can we scale given what we have? So going back to Steve's point about the pen and paper approach, it may work great now, but is that really a sustainable approach for the future? And can we use technology to create larger capacity for our organization? So that's kind of the framework that we can start looking at ourselves as nonprofits. And to those of you who are watching today, start to think about that a little bit. Where does my organization fall within that triangle? And then how can we start building off of those particular points there to expand the success of our organization?
Yeah, and the technology strategy shouldn't be limited to the IT department of the nonprofits or the for-profits. It should be run and it should be led by the business stakeholders most of the time. And like, what is the technology that supports your marketing strategy? What is the technology that supports your support systems? Those kinds of questions need to be asked when we define the overall business strategy rather than defining different strategies in the silos.
That was my next question. So it's perfect. Thank you. So I guess then the challenge becomes with more tactical concerns like funding and day-to-day operations. You've all worked with organizations. What's your advice for getting them to start to tackle this, either the strategic planning process or to finish out a process that they've already begun?
I mean, in my experience, some of the hardest challenges come when you reach a decision point and you actually have to decide to execute on a particular project, because there's always something that will make it better. There's always something more to do. And there's the old adage, it's a trite expression, the perfect's the enemy of the good. In this space, I think that's very true, because software developers, third-party consultants, others that will come in, always have something better in the bullpen when they're selling you A. When they're selling you A, they've already got B ready to go. They're not going to tell you that because they still want you to buy A. And so
Planned obsolescence.
Absolutely, and it's not a disparaging piece, it's just the business of it. So when you're getting ready to execute A, the proposition is, well, wait a minute, we'll wait, and B is coming out, and then we can do B. And then what happens is you haven't evolved, you don't execute, you don't deliver. So be willing to set your targets and be willing to achieve those, even if it may not be the absolute state-of-the-art perfect that you're made to believe that you have to have for whatever reason. Because you'll find that you'll move your organization considerably simply by delivering that, by evolving. And that's one of the things that I've seen as a challenge with a lot of organizations. Will go years on projects that seem to be never ending, and listening to people, sometimes like us, speaking a different language about where we're headed or what we're supposed to have. So I always try and help clients translate that broader kind of aspirational speaking of what you can dream versus what do we really need, what can we deliver, how much is it going to cost, what does the contract say you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and let's get it done. So let's to be a little bit more tactical than strategic. And there has to be a balance between tactics and delivery and strategy and the dream.
Yeah.
So
I think, I agree with you. So the extensibility should be the keyword here. It's not what you are needing it for today, but what you are designing it for the future, right? The question asked should be like whether my system, whatever we are doing, work for next 20 years or maybe next 10 years, right? And then it boils down to the build versus buy scenario, where whether we should build it in-house, we should use some third party to build it for us, or we should buy a product from the market, right? And these questions, I usually help my clients deciding these questions when we go into the assessments, right? And so that's why with the non-profits or for-profits, it's very important to have a CSO or a CDO or a CTO come into, or an external advisor come into the organization and assess the as-is state, right? And the to-be state. And basically, before even starting anything, just have the plan, the governance strategy, the policies around that, the staffing plan. So all these components, the tactical components of the strategy needs to be in place before you go into any project, basically.
And we actually just got our first question. Higher education as a not-for-profit sector has more than one business objective. Education, economic development, in some cases community development. How do you see this set of missions, separate missions, distinct missions in some ways, as complicating IT planning?
That's a very good question.
I'll let you guys.
It is a very good question, and we can attack it from a variety of different ways, from the core cybersecurity tension between academic freedom and CIOs that may have challenges with provost offices. I have higher ed clients as well, and dealing with the fact that you're also a regulated entity. You're covered by grant rates. You're issuing. You have a financial aid requirement. You've got a variety of security risks inherent in your environments that you need to run like a business. And then you also have academics, and you need freedoms, and you need to be able to grow and create technology that's going to work in some ways independently of all the other burdens and policies that you would typically have in a business. So I think it's a very good question, and I don't think there's one clear answer, but I think if you have an empowered general counsel, a legal advisor, a CIO, somebody in the provost's office in your institution that gets together with some frequency to discuss what are the academic interests, what are the business interests, and then what are the technologies that need to be integrated and shared between those three, and come up with a plan that actually tries to not necessarily subordinate one to the other, but come up with one that actually will work, almost like a 5-year plan as to what you're going to need and how you're going to source it. And then also budgeting, how are you going to budget for that within your organization? That always becomes a source of tension between whether it's a centralized IT budget or whether it's a more decentralized budget that allows for more freedom for departments to go out and purchase their own technology. But then how do you integrate that all back in a comprehensive enterprise way? So I don't think I've answered any of your questions there, but I think I've raised some of the bigger issues that I think you want to try and work through. But that tension, I think, is real, in my experience.
Well, I think it comes down to, I was with a nonprofit last week, actually, and the nonprofit has an education component to it. So it comes down to, where do we put those resources? Which group ends up getting those resources? Or is there a comprehensive strategy that we can utilize to engage everyone and provide solutions where everyone benefits, from development right through classroom technology? And I'm thinking that technology now for nonprofits has evolved considerably, where we can start to develop systems that allow for information to flow and touch those different areas and still remain siloed where they need to be siloed, but still talk where they need to talk. So we were suggesting a system that would allow development to pull the information that they needed from registration, and then still classroom management and learning management to be able to have that information with one single information flow. And I think thinking about those types of solutions where we're not looking at siloed software packages or siloed development, but looking at the whole institution with one view and saying, what can I do to overlay systems so that they do work in concert with each other? I think that's an important thing to do.
So have you found ERP type systems within higher ed? I mean, is that something that we have any experience with, or even with the people that have asked the question? Well, what you're describing sounds almost more like that. Right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. This was not a higher ed institute, but the same concept tends to apply where we can develop an ERP.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked with some organizations that maybe has some older legacy systems that, in other words, the institution or the organization had to prioritize what is it that they needed to spend their resources in first to get to a sort of a baseline level before they could look at anything else. So in other words, it really just it's a budgetary issue that obviously we're going to drive this thing, and then identifying the priorities, and then discussing the organic strategy so that you don't misspend money in getting to those certain points that you need to be.
So yeah, I mean, it all boils down to this: what kinds of systems you're looking for. Are those back office systems, or are those systems which are basically catering to your markets, like a ed tech platform or something like that? Now, as I said, like a non-profit or for-profit here, you have to cater to your market. So if you have to take the classrooms to people's home, that is one technology people should invest in from the educational point of view on the non-profit. Coming to what Augusto said, I mean, cloud and all these data centers are given us infinite and virtually free storage, right? It's a free storage, free MIPS, and free performance. I mean, the bandwidth is so cheap. So, so it has taken us away the burden of infrastructure managing and deploying infrastructure in-house, and so that savings that needs to go into the market where the ed tech companies or the educational foundations should go into the market and get those courses to the people who deserve it and are unable to come to the campus somehow. So those are one or two different areas where educational institutions should deploy their IT budgeting and know-how.
And so I want to shift to something that Augusto had mentioned earlier. In the Northeast, obviously, we had a denial of service type attack. And Augusto, your specific area is, when all else fails, what have you got? What are you left holding in that instance? So what are the different types of insurance that can protect clients in that worst case scenario? Because obviously we're talking about planning, we're talking about execution, but at the end of the day, these incidents do happen.
Right.
And what happens from there?
Right. Yeah, we were kidding around earlier that you're going to have the best laid plans, the greatest systems in place, the greatest contracts in place. At the end of the day, perhaps there's a data breach that happens, and now the Attorney General of your state is knocking their door and investigating and trying to determine what material damage may have been caused. And certainly, depending on the severity of your privacy data breach laws, you may be asked to perform certain deeds that could cost you significant dollars. So that's where the consideration for buying insurance, cyber liability insurance, privacy data breach insurance comes in, because again, you could have one of the best systems in place, and yet someone just inadvertently loses a laptop or has it stolen in the back of their car, and now you have a privately identifiable information that's lost or stolen, or perhaps it was stored in the cloud and then it could also be lost. You didn't lose the material or the information, but certainly you are the face. You are the receiver of the information of your stakeholders and clients and so on. So clearly, if you haven't done it, insurance, cyber liability insurance is today's must-have insurance. And you want to work with an independent agent that would know the topic of cyber liability and has access to many of the markets. There's about 40 or 50 markets out there that specialize in cyber liability. The bad news is that the policies are just not uniformed in any way, although there is a talk in the industry of somehow creating certain common elements, certain common coverages. One is so that there could be a little bit more parity in the industry, but more importantly, they can figure out a way of pricing the risk and to be able to take steps in mitigating those risks. But you'll have first party and third party, which I can go into more, but I won't bore you to death with it. You need to have that fail-safe system, if you will, because as we perceive things, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that this could cut into play. And the average cost for a record for notification, credit monitoring, etc., just as for instance, is $217. There are various numbers that are being bandied about, but that's if you have 100 records, no big deal. If you have 100,000 records, now it becomes a big deal. So anyway, that's something you should definitely look at. Do not bury your head in the sand. There's not enough people who have purchased this coverage. The C-level people need to stop putting it off and really consider it in protecting their organization.
And to that, Steve.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I agree with everything that was just said. In my experience dealing with post-data breach incident response, whether it's the forensic costs that are incurred, that when we go in to analyze your system to determine what happened, how much PII or PHI is impacted so that I can make a report to the Attorney General, that I can speak to them. And for the most part, the Attorneys General are reasonable if you have invested in at least some reasonable measures to avoid. And that's a whole other thing that we can talk about. But also the process of getting cyber insurance and applying for cyber insurance gives you a very good introspective questionnaire to go through in the underwriting form. Now, I tell a lot of my clients, before you submit it, let's talk about it, because once it's in, just like a life insurance policy, in some cases, it will be used against you at some point in the future if you're being truthful. And if you're not being truthful and you have a claim, it may be used against you then as well to say that we're not going to pay your claim. Now, I'm not picking on my friend from insurance. I worked in insurance for a long time. It is a legitimate coverage. It's more expensive. It's less expensive now than it used to be because of the competition in the market, and it does offer a lot of value, both in terms of post-breach and also in terms of just having you have a better idea of what your systems are. So a very good exercise. Not every policy is the same. Some have endorsements that take away a lot of coverage. You have to add them back in. In order to add them back in and have them be not cost prohibitive, you have to have some pretty good controls in place, which is good, which is to everybody's benefit to avoid that type of data breach harm. But in addition, what we haven't talked about is cybercrime, and I just want to touch on that because some of the bigger tragedies that I've dealt with are clients that have been hacked into, wire fraud has taken place, they've taken money out of the accounts for a variety of reasons, whether it's a keylogger or something that's been installed in their system. They've grabbed the password, the dual control maybe wasn't what it should be, and they've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, you get some of that back potentially from your insurer, and you might be able, if you catch it quick enough, to have the bank reverse some of the fraudulent wire transfers. But if you don't have the types of coverage that would deal with a cyber event, you're not going to collect. And I've had several clients that sadly have been out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars, which can be considerable, especially for a small organization and a small business. So be very sensitive to that. That's even more, that's been even more tragic than some of the data breaches where name or date of birth or social has been compromised.
I think one of the big impacts, though, is PR, especially on a small nonprofit with limited capacity for handling these types of events. What type of assistance does coverage provide with PR and managing information after a breach?
Yeah, most policies, practically all policies, will give you some kind of coverage for what we call crisis management that will help tell the story to the newspaper, and certainly you're going to take a hit on your reputation. You can certainly go it alone, or you could hire someone who knows how to handle that. But most policies, the good policies, would have that coverage. But that's a very good question, because the reputational damage is huge. But if I can just go back to Steve's comment on the cybercrime, the latest and greatest exposure that you have to be familiar with and contemplating is what is called social engineering fraud. So most policies, certainly the crime policy, your typical crime policy that you already have, there's something that happens in cyberspace that falls through the crack and isn't covered under the crime policy. The computer fraud, and then there's the computer fraud basically says if someone uses your computers to move the accounts from your bank account to their personal account in Cayman Island, you'd be covered. And then there's the funds transfer fraud, where someone from the outside of the organization somehow steals your passwords and is able to move money around or steal. But everyone probably listening in this, you probably have experienced this, where someone who's the CAO is telling the CFO, will you please wire $30,000 to this because we just got to pay off this bill, and it wasn't really coming from the CEO, but it certainly looked like it. And that is the social engineering fraud coverage that you've got to have, and that's because what happens is you gave the money voluntarily, so it was not an employee dishonesty. But at the same token, nobody stole the password. That's why it's falling through the cracks, and that's why you've got to have it.
I'd like to circle back on that. One thing that's important to do is to actually test this too. And
good point.
One place where this can often come into play is with IT. Someone calls up and says on the phone to the help desk, "I'm the president. I need my password reset. I'm out on a trip somewhere, and I need my password reset. Okay, what would you like it to be? Okay, I made that change." All of a sudden, that person has the keys to the kingdom.
Right.
They have the email address, and they now have the power to inflict major harm on your enterprise. So one takeaway is to go out there, try this with your IT provider to make sure that they use some sort of mechanism to keep that from happening, and actually put that into effect. So yeah, try it later on today. See what happens.
And actually, follow-up question for you around smaller organizations. So we have some smaller organizations, some small churches, for example, that are on the line. What are some innovative and affordable ways that they can use technology to help their directors and/or pastors meet their missions? Some of the things that you're seeing out there that are more tailored to smaller organizations.
Well, I think one of the things to take a look at are some of the free options that are out there. I mean, TechSoup has an amazing donation program. And if you have not explored TechSoup yet, definitely take a look at their website, because it's more than just software products, which it has been for years. TechSoup offers a number of services now, from assessment work to implementation work. They also provide a lot of training resources for folks as well. They have a great webinar series too, where you can see some amazing training videos. Well, I think one of the basic things that nonprofits are sometimes missing out on, especially those who have a basic technology footprint, So let's take a church, for example, or something along those lines. Email sometimes is something that is provided by your telecommunications provider, let's say Comcast or something like that. You can get Office 365 for free. That's a good place to start for your organization. You can put your files there. You can put your email there. You can have complete control of that particular environment with security, two-factor authentication, and that whole platform is completely free. So if you're concerned, maybe a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-person organization about that aging server that's sitting in a closet somewhere that you're wondering, is it backed up? How am I going to get it back up and running? Is it secure? Well, that's a good place to shift your resources towards to take advantage of that.
And I guess a related follow-up question, are there any nonprofits, and this is to anyone that you've run into, that you would consider exemplars or best in class? I guess that's naming names, but
well, I think I can talk through a scenario on this without naming names. A couple nonprofits who I've worked with who have gone completely cloud, where they do not have a server at all on site. One of the challenges that they were facing was how do I connect my workforce who was out in the field constantly? Well, moving entirely cloud-based, where you don't have anything on-prem, is a good way of doing that. It gets rid of the VPN technology. It gets rid of all of those things that we've been relying on for years for mobile workforces, and puts the entire organization up there. And you guys can chime in on the risk and everything on this, because I think that's a good idea. But another organization who I recently worked with, they were able to transform their data processes and basically take their online signups for volunteers, for events, for participants, streamline those into one data system. So everyone who touches the organization has one footprint and one database that they flow into. Then there's specialized applications that hang off of this data platform, and information automatically flows into that. So you're dealing with a common database where the C-level executives can go and run reports all day long, capture all of the transactions with the organization in one place, and then do the reports that they need, create their dashboards. But then the individual pieces of the organization, say there's an education program or a volunteer program, they can work with the tools that they need as well. And that particular organization started using a donation program through the Salesforce Foundation. And they were able to custom tailor that application for free. The implementation did cost money, but they were able to custom tailor that application for free. And the ongoing costs are free for that hosting. But that set them really apart from many other organizations who are dealing with silos of information and dissimilar technology platforms that don't really integrate. That gave them one place for all of that information to flow, be recorded, and then report on it in custom ways. When we talk about the custom reports for that, it's really easy to capture all of that information and do drag and drop ad hoc reporting. And it's changed the way that they work. It really has.
I think it all depends on the size of the nonprofit. If it's like 1 to 5 person nonprofit, I think a good way to go, as Greg said, is Google for Nonprofit or free version of Office 365. You'll get your personal email, your organizational email, a group messaging app. You'll also get a SharePoint application with Office 365. With Google, you'll get a very nice business analytics application where you can run all kinds of reporting and analytics around your customers. 5 to 50, I'll say, go with more on Azure or different kinds of Amazon Cloud or something where you can tailor to your needs. Salesforce is another example where you can have a CRM or a customer 360 view kind of thing where you can more focus on your markets. And I think more than 100 people company is, again, it depends what's your technology strategy, whether you want to go for private cloud, public cloud, or but yeah, there are a lot of tools which are available for free, and most of these companies, including Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, they're special pricing for nonprofits. So let's take advantage of that.
I'd like to add to the, and perhaps ask you the question. speaking of best practices, I'm sometimes appalled at some of my clients, nonprofit clients, because we specialize in nonprofits. We will get these emails to us. It could be a census of their employees, you know, for their health insurance renewal, and they didn't encrypt it. I think encryption is a very simple thing that one can do at whatever size or level of the organization. You know, especially the mobile devices. You know, that proverbial laptop that gets stolen in the back of someone's car. So, and of course, that ongoing, the managers probably get a lot of training, but it's got to go all the way down to all levels in terms of employees.
I would love to know what the percentages of folks who do encrypt versus don't encrypt, because that is critical, absolutely critical to data security. I mean, and it's so easy to do. Let's take the Office 365 scenario. It's $2 per user per month for encryption services.
Wow.
So it's ounce of prevention.
I mean, I think, when you think about what it does, I mean, providing for encryption, you look at most state statutes that trigger data breach reporting. You know, if you were utilizing encryption, you don't really have to go much farther. If you can evidence that you've had encryption on your mobile device and it was stolen, or if it was encrypted at rest or in transit, that that's a defense and a safe harbor to having to trigger the data breach reporting. Similarly, on some of the policies, they will pay for any loss of protected health information as long as it was encrypted. It's kind of a little bit of a play there, because you may not have to report it all if it's encrypted. But I don't think a lot of people are utilizing encryption, generally speaking. I think they feel it's burdensome. It is at times.
It is, yeah.
You know, we experience, getting emails from folks that are encrypted. Maybe they shouldn't be, or they are, and then you have to go to a third-party website to get to it and put in the password. And it's seen to be a barrier to people that want to use email to communicate, and they may be communicating with a service population that isn't that sophisticated, that isn't going to understand what this means, and is going to be more time-consuming, for a very limited resources. So, in that sense, the balance between utility and the actual risk of having to make a reportable data breach is what I think a lot of organizations are trading off on.
Yeah, I think it boils down to ease of use, accessibility, and again, security. Right? But most of these emails, which is in Office 365 or Google or Gmail, they are encrypted on the server. So your data is still encrypted. It's not end-to-end encryption though. But yeah, if we do end-to-end encryption, then we need to have a tokenizer software on both the computers, and not everyone will have it. But from the data breach point of view, at that point of time, your data breach boils down to your computer, how much virus protection and how much privacy protection you have on your machine, rather than the servers where your email is. So that's I feel is still protected right now.
But I think it's also important for people to realize that encryption goes a little bit beyond just mobile devices too. I look at folks and say, well, how much information are you storing on your servers and computers, and do you have a secure facility for that? Some folks have an office somewhere that's in an open area or in a high risk area potentially, and those are things that you should consider as well. What if somebody broke into my office and stole hardware? They may not know. Really, they may not be after the information that's on there, but to have it encrypted, it's just one extra piece of a prevention. When you have to report, you can say, well, that was stolen, it was encrypted. Okay, let me get another one in here, and we're okay. We're back up in business without that risk footprint.
And that does go back to the reputational issues. It absolutely does. It helps me get to have a story to tell. When I'm defending somebody against either an AG or the HHS on a HIPAA case, I'm looking for my ammunition to defend, and most of that is going to be, what have you done to try and prevent what I think we all might recognize as being the inevitable, right? At some point, someone is going to compromise your systems, whether it's an insider misconfiguring something erroneously or somebody maliciously from the outside. It's going to happen. And so when you go to make that report, do you have a good story to tell about what you've done affirmatively, what you've invested, that you've appreciated the risk, that you've taken some steps, that you understand what encryption is, some basic things. And if I can't say that you do or have done that, it leaves me or the person whose job it is to represent you with a lot less to leverage and to try and keep you from having a fine or to have a reporter take a slant that's maybe not too nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just the technology issue, it's overall, there are a lot of physical breaches. I mean, I was in a plane today, right? I mean, a guy next to me sitting, working on his office laptop and working on his emails. I mean, I could have sneaked into all his emails and looked what, I mean, I'll say like just having that $25 screen, right? Which protects you from working in a privacy I mean, those small things add up, right? I mean, leaving your laptop out to your friend's house or having working in a public place and on a public Wi-Fi, I mean, wherever you prompted to be unsecure, but still people work on that. So it's security is a totally behavioral control issue where you can have technology help you, but it's again up to you how you want to secure your data and secure your.
I want to transition the conversation, and this question is primarily for you, although I think everybody will have some opinions based on who you all are, what you do. And the question is about outsourcing versus insourcing with smaller organizations. And the question was, especially with larger institutions, I would say, if I may interpret the question, or if I may add some commentary, that this impacts all institutions, outsourcing versus insourcing, because typically in a larger organization, it's departments that you're dedicating towards technology, technology in all of its forms. In a smaller organization, though, it's the decision to hire Sally, who has fundraising and data background, versus Steve, who is just a pure fundraiser. And then what does that impact on Sally's time when you're dividing Sally's day? But also, what benefits does it have that you're hiring somebody who's got both of those skill sets versus Steve, who is focused on fundraising? And so again, I'm amending, apologies, the question, but whether you're a small organization or a large organization, insourcing versus outsourcing, and what do you gain? What do you lose? We'll start with.
Sure. So with insourcing, I guess what you're asking is whether you have most of your business functions in-house, right? Yes. So yeah, again, I'll say with the smaller organizations, it is much more beneficial to outsource, because you want to have like 4 or 5 people who are focused on your business processes rather than your technology issues, your infrastructure issues, your XYZ products, what you are deploying. So outsourcing in the sense where you have your core functions within your company, but you have all your help and all your back-end and support systems given to the companies who do them best. Like, for example, Office email server and all email virtualization should be maybe Microsoft 360, or if you are doing some advertising and all, that can be Google. But you still want to have a Sally who knows how to raise funds, because that you cannot outsource, obviously. For bigger organization, it again becomes a build versus buy question. That what's your budget, what's your IT budget, what is your business strategy, and how your technology strategy aligns with your business strategy, right? So if it's a big healthcare payer who is a non-profit though, but has millions of dollars to spend on their legacy transformations or making customer 360 kind of view, which is a state of the art, then obviously you don't want to outsource it because you maintain the data, right? So I heard a very beautiful quote somewhere that technology ages like a fish and data ages like a wine, right? So, so you don't want to do away with your data and basically, give it to someone else when you have that precious mine with you. Technology, on the other hand, you need to make sure that you are ahead of the game. If you are working as a healthcare payer or an insurance company, you have if you see Aflac, right? Aflac advertises now you can get a claim in 1 day, right? I mean, no one could have imagined that like 1 or 2 years back that you get the claim on the same day. I mean, there might be some fine print, so, but I mean, that's how they advertise. So how technology is moving into deep learning, artificial intelligence, and using all those things, it might not be possible for a non-profit to invest in all those things initially, right? So I'll say it all depends on what you can maintain and what third-party products are out there. Have some kind of assessment or audit, and then basically decide on where you want to go from there.
So on the question of outsourcing versus insourcing, it's very important if you do outsource to have someone on your staff who is that liaison between your in-house processes and your outsourced services. That's especially true with implementation of a new technology initiative. Having someone who understands that business inside and out and who's able to communicate it effectively to the technology folks is so critical. The other thing that does for you is you need someone on your staff who can become, for lack of a better term, a person who rallies the team around new technology. Someone who can communicate effectively and say, all right, guys and girls, this is going to be tough. We need to really work hard to figure out how we're going to get to this point. We've made this investment. Let's really work hard at it together here. There's going to be struggles. There's going to be places where we fall, but we're going to be able to pick up and move the organization forward through this. That piece is really critical, but it really needs to be a person who understands those processes internally and who can communicate those effectively to a technology integrator.
Steve, you have any thoughts on contractual language?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a variety of things. For organizations that we can talk about a hybrid approach that has that internal organizational knowledge and expertise of whatever the legacy systems may be or whatever the workflows are, and then how to use third-party providers to help enhance that and grow it and then host it so that from a technical standpoint, that burden isn't placed internally where it's not core to the mission, until you grow to a point where there's a balancing act there and it's more efficient or more cost beneficial to have a certain resource internal versus out. But that's a constant evolution that you look at it. The other thing is an independent view that helps you to technically challenge and have equal, if not superior, knowledge to your third-party service providers. That's really important. Not to say that people aren't honest. It's just it keeps for a better conversation as to what it is you really need, and so that you can have a better dialogue. It keeps everybody focused on what the mission is, as opposed to I have one plan that's given to me. I don't know anything about technology. This is what they say I need and what I have to do. Right. And if I don't do this, then maybe it's going to be my fault if we don't have the technology we need, and without ever admitting proudly or otherwise that you don't understand it. So finding resources that can help agnostically guide you is important. Everybody has a financial auditor for the most part, that are looking at your finances. They have components there that can be helpful. That's going to most likely be an audit comment. What are you doing for technology? If it hasn't been yet, you'll probably start to see that in your annual financial audit reports. So utilize that as an opportunity to partner with people that are skilled and experienced and put together a statement of work that isn't going to be dependent on them selling a particular service or a product, but really guiding you toward a bunch of different options so that you can tailor something that's comfortable for yourself. In-house versus inside versus out, I don't think, to everybody's point, that I can say, yes, you have to do it one way or another. It really will depend. But I think it's true, though, the smaller you are, the more likely you are to benefit from having someone else deal with it, simply because it's not your core mission and it's distracting.
Yeah, I mean, we have an organization that it's a hybrid. We have someone who handles, and many of our clients are in this mode where if there is room in their budget where they can have someone in-house, clearly the immediacy of the services will be there. But the downside is let's just face it, there's not necessarily the bench strength that they need in terms of IT information and understanding unto themselves. So the outsourcing part, I think the breadth and depth of the bench strength is going to be significantly better for the needs of the organization. Again, it does depend on your need and your budget, but I'm not sure you can necessarily decide insourcing and outsourcing one or the other. It really has to depend on your needs and what your future needs are and what your current in-house capabilities are.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but what I'll just press on that you still, even if you decide to go in-house or you want to go outsource, you still need to have a honest assessment of your systems, what you have right now, right? And I think it's beneficial, and I think it's cost effective to have someone from outside, senior advisor kind of person who can come in and do some audits or validation and verification kind of thing into your as a system, and then give you a roadmap for 2B system, and then basically the stakeholders can decide what's the best option. So a third eye is always, I think.
Yeah.
I think perspective's very important with this, getting an outside view, because whether it's insourced or outsourced, having that person working with your organization or group working with your organization for an extended period of time, there needs to be some sort of perspective brought in to say, well, there might be something else out there, or something that they're not looking at. Occasionally you can get tunnel vision when you're just focused on one place.
Even with an outsource.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Steve? Is there?
Well, I know the question was about contracts, and I could go on forever about the types of contracts you should have, and the service level agreements, some of the weasel words that you see that you want to avoid, that create kind of illusory promises to do things. With an employee and somebody that you have some comfort level that he or she has the knowledge and the skills and the expertise, and hopefully an aligned mission to do the job. And if they don't, your remedy is to progressively discipline them or find someone new that has that. When you're dealing with a third-party service provider, you may have a 3 or 5 year engagement. You may be with them for a lot longer. You may find a divorce there to be a lot harder to deal with. So managing that agreement and having language in the agreement that helps you to motivate them to deliver is important. Your ability to influence that language is going to be limited depending on your size. The smaller organization that you are, the less likely you're going to be able to change Amazon Cloud Services Agreement, or if anyone can, right? But there are alternatives, that can provide similar services to what, say, Amazon would. I just picked them randomly to provide for hosting other solutions that you may very well be able to obtain warranties and representations and indemnifications. 3 pieces of a contract that are very important that will be to your benefit. That for that risk will be transferred more to them, to the provider. And then for the residual risk that you might seek to transfer through insurance or some other way will be even small.
Right.
So looking at the entirety of that portfolio through the risk lens, I think is very important to you.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a very interesting point of SLAs. I mean, I'll press on SLAs. I worked with a company long time back, which has an organization, third party, to manage all the servers and do some basic IT work, right? They somehow signed a 10-day SLA, right? Now, people went and, okay, the server is down. Can you start a server? Yeah, 10 days SLA, right? Hey, can you start a batch process? Or 10 days SLA, right? So yeah, I mean, this is how it boils down to the real world, right? I mean, it's all in the contract. I mean, they'll do it faster, right? But if they don't want to, they cannot. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something also that nonprofits should really take a look at. So that 10-day SLA is fairly extreme. But think about for a minute what your current state of recovery is in business continuity as well. Right. So I may be a nonprofit with a server that's sitting in a closet somewhere, and I don't know what shape those hard disks are in, and I don't know where my data is backed up or how I would even restore it. I've restored files here and there, but what would happen in a catastrophic event? How much time would I be down, and how would my mission be impacted? Those are all things that C-level executives should be taking a look at and really having a plan in place for how to deal with those business interruptions. Recovery time objective and recovery point objective are 2 important things to really look at. how long would it take me to get back up and running if there was a failure, and what point in time could I recover back to? To really think about what that means to your organization is something that's often an afterthought, because we always look at the newer and better thing that's out there. We're moving to a new system, but we don't always think about what happens when something does go wrong.
Yeah.
And that 10-day SLA might be in some of those contracts.
Someone wrote it in the contract, right? And the lawyers agreed.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of little hidden gems in these agreements.
Yeah, and you had mentioned, the server in the closet, but it's not just the organizations that have the server in the closet. We were talking earlier before we were on mic about an organization that has its entire infrastructure in a single data center. Large organization, massive organization, one data center, and the risks associated with that.
Huge. I mean, if you see like the hurricanes coming up, and if your data center is on path of the hurricane, guess what? You're down for like a couple of days.
And it's not just the data center, the physical plant. It's all of those connections coming into the data center. There was an issue with level 3 in Miami where both fiber connections going into the level 3 NOC were disabled. So that whole network operations center there was severed completely off the grid. And then things could be rerouted, but it's not uncommon for a hurricane or a large-scale natural disaster to disrupt that communication flow. And how would your business be impacted with that? Also, in a single workplace environment, if your internet went down for an extended period, what's your backup plan? How do people work? Where can you send them? Can they tether on mobile devices? Business continuity is important to look at.
Yeah, one comes to mind that their mission is engaged during natural disasters and things along those lines, and they embarked on a comprehensive virtualization and asynchronous replication of both their compute environments and their data out to a remote hosted facility. And that, I think, again, that's probably cost prohibitive for a lot of organizations because there's a lot that goes into that. But if you're thinking about your data center and it's a single point of failure, and you have the ability to find a private cloud or even have your equipment located in a data center that's in a different place, and to synchronize that information so that if you did have that failure, the other would stand up almost immediately. But that kind of setup is becoming more commonplace and more affordable, given the costs of remote data warehousing. So thinking about those types of initiatives for business continuity and redundancy, depending on where you are, and the need for a remote workforce to be able to access that, which they could do even if your physical plant were to catch fire or be otherwise unavailable.
It saves a lot of time for that scramble when there is something that's going on, to have all of that planned out and ready to go.
And I think most of the cloud services which are in the market, they provide this kind of redundancy, and you have active kind of networks and multiple nodes active on the same time.
But people forget sometimes too, it's more than just your data. It's more than just your information. It's about the applications and how they're going to be stood up and how long it will take. Not just that you have your data, right? But maybe I'm moving on to more
That's
questions.
the question that I want to ask.
But will you be able to run, from this location and fail over and back? And testing that, I think, is a big challenge.
I think the best probably the way to answer it, if you're considering outsourcing, is what would be the disaster recovery scenario that would be involved and the implications that come along with all of that. The response time of the service provider, who owns the data, how do you get back without the business interruption and operational interruption?
And so then the question that we were asked, which I think is sort of circling back from probably the very first points that we made, and it directly relates to the purpose. So we talk about that organization, that exemplar, that best in class, that we all know. And we think, wow, I wish all my clients could be like that. What is it that all of that buys them? What is their day like? How is their mission impacted? How are their clients, the communities that they serve? What's the point? Is it technology for technology's sake? Is it security for security's sake? So
So let me translate that example into real world here. So individuals in this particular scenario were going out and collecting case notes. And what they would do is they would take a notepad and a notebook and they would collect case notes. This is the one that we were just talking about earlier. They would take those case notes, they would go somewhere after working with people out in the field. They would go somewhere, get on Wi-Fi, type all of that up, or do it at the end of the day, type all of it up into a database. And then they would go back and do that again. So they were basically double entering all of that all day long. The transformation of that to a completely online process saved time. And that's time where you're focusing on spending it with the people who you serve. That time is so important and so critical to the mission of the organization. One organization I recently worked with, 90% of their time was spent doing administrative tasks. 90% of the folks' time in the field was spent doing paperwork and filling out forms and going through duplicative processes, and it was disheartening to individuals who had trained to serve people. They were social workers and folks like that who went to school and had their master's degree, and they found themselves doing all of this administrative work. And if that administrative burden can be reduced by 10, 15, 25% through the use of technology, that's real time where those skills are being put to use helping people.
I'll take a different take on that. I mean, yeah, we have to make the back office more efficient, but I think nowadays it's more than back office, it's your pure business, right? If it's a non-profit or for-profit, you still need customers, right? And now if you see millennials, they need instant results, right? I mean, they won't wait for 5-day claims and all. Like Aflac coming up with same-day claim processing and getting your claim check on the same day. Quicken is another company. It's not a non-profit, but they claim that if you want a mortgage, go to their website, they'll approve the mortgage same day, right? You just fill the online application, you get the mortgage approval. Gone are the days when you have the underwriters doing it for 21 days and then you come to know, okay, your mortgage is approved or not approved, right? Uber, another company, I mean, you click for the car, you get a car within 2 minutes, that's their SLA. So it's the technology takes you to get to that SLA, right? I mean, if you are using auto tiering kind of cloud mechanism, or you are basically have a elastic capacity where you can expand your servers, and once your demand is more, it's a good problem to solve. Earlier it used to be infrastructure and IT guys scrambling over each other and fighting on the Thanksgiving days, and now it's elastic capacity. With a click of a button, boom, you are having 20 gigs more RAM and terabytes of data without even getting up your seat. So it's all about how efficient and how agile you become with the technology, and what do you provide that, how do you translate that benefits to your customer. That, I think, takes you into the cutting edge. Whether you are a non-profit or a for-profit, you still need to have a better customer service. So it all boils down to that.
And let's talk about customers for a second here. One area where that's important too is with fundraising, and nonprofits have to deal with fundraising and donor relations constantly. So if there's a way to improve that particular experience, let's take that exemplary example again here, where we have a nonprofit who is now collecting analytics on everyone who touches the organization, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's someone who showed up to an event, whether it's someone who clicked on a social media link. All of that information is being captured in one place, and that data and that demographic information, when those people engage with the organization, can be used. We're starting to capture information. Just a simple birthday, automated birthday greeting that goes out to folks can change the way that your nonprofit fundraises. Having that information captured in a database and sending somebody a card on their birthday, an e-card, will increase donor engagement. It's a proven thing.
Yeah. And I want to add just a small point again, coming to the regulations, right? It makes your organization more agile for the regulations. I mean, if there's a barrage of regulations coming in the door every day for the nonprofits, right? I mean, more than ever. If your IT organization and if your technology is agile and more elastic and more fundamentally loosely coupled, then you are much more in a better shape in handling the regulations than your competitors, basically. And that gives you an advantage as well.
Yes, not much to add that other than you're right. I think we touched on it. It depends on what it is you're doing. I mean, if your nonprofit is you're serving homeless people in a soup kitchen, I mean, how much technology does that really is that really needed? But when you see the other aspects of your organization, such as the fundraising, where you can use technology. I've even heard it, it's trying to move the needle society-wise, right? Well, that's going to require some kind of fact-finding, gathering information, and does use technology. Then you go to the other spectrum where we're working with a client now that is trying to enhance the ability of those serving in nursing homes to be able to migrate that information to the medical officer, the medical doctor, the medical chief officer, so that they can understand how they comply with the regulations governing nursing homes. So, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. So, but it doesn't take away the day-to-day care of the elderly. But there is use of technology. So you can't be saying that technology is for the sake of it. Technology. I think there's a lot of areas that it can improve in the nonprofit sector. It's just how it's just it's how what you need.
And when those processes start to happen automatically, where they don't require someone behind the scenes sending out those pushes, when you can create automated workflows within your organization to say, okay, all those people who registered for the event, send them a reminder automatically a week beforehand. Right. And with that, maybe attach a little ask or something like that, or attach a follow-up survey after the event, and maybe attach a little ask to that too. Sure. It creates engagement, but engagement can be so much more. Back to the example that you used with fundraising and service arms, engagement can be volunteers. Right. How do we engage people who want to give more than just money, but they want to give their time, and creating a workflow through technology that allows all areas of the organization to benefit.
So taking from that, right, all areas to benefit, and I think what you're all getting at is sustainability and impact. So there are obviously funding organizations out there that are allowing this to happen, whether it's government or foundations, etc.
DuPont.
Right, exactly. Our sponsors today. Is that you're working with nonprofits? What are you hearing from them as far as funding, and how is that funding story? How funding is happening? How is that impacting your work and the work that you're being asked to do? Is that part of it? Are funders changing what they're asking for? Are they demanding more, demanding less? And who are the funders that are looking at this?
So for I'll start, because some of the ones that I have fresh in my mind, they're reactive. So technology investments are legal or compliance. It's usually not something that you sit down on any given day and say, I'm going to spend money on lawyers or legal or compliance. You're usually going to do it reactively, because either you have to be in compliance with a law, or you're showing some evolution in this space is required in order to be tied to some other type of funding or a grant. Now, that may make that grant writing or that grant application unattractive to a particular nonprofit, because they don't have the funds independently to pay for the consulting services or the time to evolve either their systems or to have somebody guide them as to where they should go. So I think having a source of funding for the very assessment, helps to make it cost neutral, or at least subsidized to the point where they feel more comfortable to even ask the question of, what do I need to do? How can I responsibly do it? And will I then be faced with receiving a report that tells me if I don't invest $50,000 that I don't have, I'm going to somehow be deficient. Because I think there's a fear there that asking the question is only going to give them the answer that they can't deal with. And so debunking that a little bit and making sure that they understand, no, it's proportional. It is responsible thought and progress toward the goal, because nobody is so completely secure that they can't be hacked. All we need to do is look at the newspaper and see that even the most secure systems are compromised. So that's not the goal. I think the goal is spending the time to understand what you have, how it can be made better, and investing something that's responsible and proportional to your budgets in that vein. And then, doing it every year incrementally.
I actually chair an organization called the ARC of Fountain Valley, which serves people with intellectual disabilities. And our director of development has expressed this need for certain technology to be brought to the organization. We're actually one of the largest employers in the town of where we have the organization housed. And there's a certain foundation for public giving in our area, in the Hartford area, that we were surprised at. They welcomed that opportunity to fund a need that we can legitimately show cause and effect, or at least have some metrics that could be established as far as furthering the mission of the organization. As simple as expanding our capability, the razor's edge for donation management, donor management. But it's something as simple as putting a device in a fleet of vehicles to keep the safety of not only the drivers, but especially the clients. So I think funders are realizing we live in a technology-driven world, and there are some things that our organizations need. And I think certainly from my experience, there's a willingness.
I think it's also important that with funders, there needs to be a balance, because a lot of times funders will be, organizations will receive funding from a lot of different areas. And each one of those organizations that provides funding, whether it's government, whether it's a foundation, they're all requiring certain metrics to come back to validate the funding experience. And do nonprofits have enough capacity to provide that type of detail back to the funders? I was with some organizations, and they said we spend, when it comes time for the funding reports, we can spend up to 40 hours of our time generating these funding reports because we don't have the tools in place to streamline our operations. So funders, it's one thing that there needs to be an awareness of the capacity of the nonprofit to provide that. And maybe the funders and the nonprofit should work together to see if the front end systems and the back end systems are in place to provide that information before requiring it. Maybe applying some funding to those systems prior to bolting on those additional requirements to make sure they have the capacity to do so. I was with one organization, and the funder was asking for certain information, and the system that they had for collecting demographics was not capable of taking that information in. They couldn't do a custom field, and it didn't export to anything, so they were having side Excel documents with that information in there and then funneling that into the reports. But when funding changes workflow dramatically, we have to be careful about that type of impact, because it could be detrimental to the organization as well if not carefully thought out.
Okay. Actually, I guess we should wrap up. I want to just ask for final thoughts. Augusto and Steve, managing risk. In 4 words or less. No.
Well, think of it this way: risk management is really the thought process, especially in IT or any kind of risk you assume. It's identifying the risks you have and then making decisions on what to do with those risks. You can either eliminate them. Sometimes you can't. You could mitigate them. Reduce the exposure as best you can, or you could transfer the risk, i.e. buy an insurance policy. And at the end of the day, if none of those three work for you, for whatever reason, you just simply accept the risk. But the key is understanding what those are, and then doing an assessment on how to deal with them, up to the point of even buying kind of risk transfer mechanism, and certainly having a good contractual review for your legal exposures and compliance issues. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. My fraud, when I do these assessments, I'm looking at it from fraud risks and privacy risks and cyber as well, because not all risks, but at least those, because they're more closely related. And the templates we use are exactly what we just mentioned: your inherent risk, your controls, and your residual risk. And then that level of residual risk is you decide what is acceptable and what isn't. And then you can go back and invest more in controls, hopefully get that residual risk down. And then at the end of the day, if that cost benefit in those controls aren't there, transfer. How do we do it? Right, insurance and hopefully some of the contractual indemnifications. Maybe you pay a little bit more on a contract to go with somebody who's actually has the capitalization and the insurance, and they have cyber insurance. We've got to talk about our third-party providers. If you have insurance requirements and they're promising to indemnify you, then who are they really?
Right.
And how much money do they have? And do they have insurance that would cover that very loss? They're going to have the same gap in terms of their general liability and other things that we talked about here for our own. So just being aware of what they are, not in a disabling way, just in an informative way, in a non-threatening way, and then just setting about whittling away at what those are so that you can be comfortable having a defensive posture and saying, hey, it happened. We were breached, but this is everything that we did. And I feel very comfortable that we were responsible and be able to say that to your Attorney General.
And now on the sort of the downer side and the happy side over there, we just kind of separated you guys. Business processes, flexibility, scalability. Final word, final thoughts, Vikram.
So the business processes, there's no one business process. There's like small business processes within each organization. I think the focus should be on each business processes and see how technology can help make it better, rather than transforming the whole business at once. Take one business process at a point and make sure your technology makes it to the perfect level. Scalability is, as I said, it's basically because of the cloud and because of the all third-party data centers. The scalability has been much easier to accomplish nowadays with the elasticity and auto provisioning and analytics. Those kinds of things have made like scalability and DR, BCDR very effective.
So I'll circle back a little bit also on assessment, because I think that's important too. Just assessing where you're at as a nonprofit and assessing risk, assessing your backup, your DR, assessing your capacity, assessing who you have on your team to lead this charge forward, assessing where you want to go. And then once you have that foundation in place of knowing where you're at, then you can decide where you want to go.
Right.
And then start looking at platforms and saying, okay, are those platforms going to increase my reliability? Are they going to increase my security? Are they going to make things better for my mission? And examining platforms, to Vikram's point, starting with one business process is a fantastic idea, but identifying platforms that can expand beyond that and understanding how those link to the rest of my organization to provide uniform platforms that are open, that can communicate to other places. I think that's the real key for organizations, is to find those common platforms that are open, that can grow with the organization. And that way we're not doing a complete rip and replace down the road. We have long-term sustainability. And if we can accomplish those security pieces, write our policies well, the organization is going to be on a great track.
And having that trusted advisor is the key, basically. You need to have someone who goes into and creates a roadmap for you to take you from your level A to your perceived goal. in matter of time.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much for spending this afternoon talking about strategic planning and technology in the nonprofit world. I want to thank our gracious host, the Jesse Ball DuPont Center, as well as the sponsors, the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, for having us here to talk about these important issues. And I want to thank everyone, obviously, that turned up, logged in, and sat with us, and all the great questions that were asked. So,
Thank you.
good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.